Good morning, distinguished colleagues, and warm greetings from Los Angeles. My name is Peiwen Su, and I serve as the exclusive director of the CYMC International Music Festival and Competition. I'm also a violinist and an educator who has spent much of the past decade exploring how young performers develop not just technical accuracy, but something far more essential, presence. It is a great honor to present here at the 16th International Congress of Psychology and Education, where scholars from all over the world gather to ask the same core question that drives my own work. How does learning transform the human mind? This study includes 10 years of direct classroom observation, reflected dialogue with young musicians and teachers. It began not as a research project, but as a personal curiosity. As I watched students prepare for performances year after year, I realized that something was happening on that stage that could not be captured by exams, lesson plans, or technical practices. Children who were calm and expressive in lessons would freeze on the stage under the lights. On the other hand, some students who seemed anxious or unfocused in class suddenly can be alive on stage. It was as if the act of being seen revealed an entirely different layer of learning, one that involved emotion, identity, and the regulation of self under pressure. This observation became the seed of my research question. What does performance actually teach? Not only about music, but about courage, identity, and the experience of being visible? From a psychological perspective, stage performance is a fascinating context. It naturally evokes arousal, self-awareness, and social evaluation. The same mechanisms studied in fields like self-efficacy theory, emotional regulation, and motivational psychology. Unlike controlled experiments, however, the stage presents these processes in their most authentic form. The child cannot hide from uncertainty. They must learn to act within it. And so, this study includes not only musical analysis, but the live emotional data of young performers. How they breathe before beginning, how they react to mistakes, how they make sense of a pause. Each of these moments becomes a window into the development of confidence and presence. Today, I will be sharing how those everyday performance experiences, moments often treated as the end of instruction, can in fact serve as developmental laboratories for cultivating emotional strength and self-belief. In much of traditional music education, performances is often positioned as the final test, a moment of evaluation that verifies what has been learned. However, years of classrooms and stage observation gradually led me to a different realization. Each time a young musician walked onto the stage, I witnessed not only a display of skill, but an unfolding psychological event. Behind every note, there was a negotiation between fear and expression, control and surrender, self-protection and self-reevaluation. This study also includes 10 years of observation and more than 200 individual performances. It adopts a developmental psychology perspective, viewing the correct concert stage as a socially intensified learning environment, one that activates the same emotional and cognitive system described in the Bandura's theory of self-efficiency and Ryan and Desi's self-determination model. In other words, that study includes the direct observation of confidence formation in vivo within authentic, high-stakes, high-text performance context rather than simulated laboratory tasks. The stage also becomes a natural field for studying how belief systems evolve when the learner faces visibility, risk, and judgment. Through qualitative analysis of behavior cues, verbal reflections, and teacher-student interactions, this research examines how psychological constructs such as arousal interpretation, copying flexibility, and social self-appraisal manifest during performance. It bridges the gap between laboratory-based studies from performance anxiety and the lived experience of children developing emotional competence through the arts. Let's go to some theoretical framework. This study includes a systematic of 4 major theories that bridge psychology and performance. First, from Bandura's self-efficiency theory, we know that confidence grows through mastery, modeling encouragement, and psychological regulation. Performance naturally engages all of this. Every concert is a live experiment in belief. Second, Goffman described social life as a series of performances. For children, the stage is often their first consciously constructed front stage, a space where they start managing visibility and self-image. Then, Hall reframed identity as a lifelong process of becoming, meaning that every performance becomes a small rehearsal of who one might become. And Ryan and Desi's self-determination theory reminds us that authentic motivation emerges when autonomy, competence, and connection align. When those needs to meet on stage, learning becomes joyful, not fear-driven. Together, these frameworks support the core claim of this research. The stage isn't just a test of skill. It's a structured social environment that builds agency, confidence, and identity. To study this system, I used the California Youthmusic Competition, let's call it CYMC, as a natural research site. CYMC operates both in person and online, connecting over 200 students each year, ages 7 to 18, across more than 20 countries. This study includes data collected from those participants, each moving through a progressive visibility pathway. The study also includes systematic behavioral observation, focusing on indicators such as how long students posed before starting, how their body alignment changed under the pressure, and how they recovered after a visible mistakes. It also includes qualification interviews immediately after each performance, and reflections from judges, peers, and parents. Across different instruments and cultural backgrounds, similar developmental arcs appeared. Children's relationship to visibility followed a consistent trajectory from avoidance to compliance to authorship. This pattern suggests that confidence is not merely an individual trait, but a relational construct that evolves through feedbacks, audience, perception, and internal self-appraisal. In this case, CYMC became a living laboratory of performance psychology, a dynamic ecosystem where learning, emotion, and courage interacted daily. Unlike experimental labs that isolate variosities, this environment preserved the authentic complexity of human performance. Here, every performance functioned as a miniature developmental experiment, revealing how children transform stage anxiety into readiness and visibility into self-definition. Most studies on performance psychology focus on symptom control, how to manage anxiety or slow the heartbeat before going on stage. But this study includes a different view. It sees anxiety not as a problem, but as a developmental energy, a sign that growth is happening right at the age of comfort. From a developmental psychology perspective, that moment of arousal is when children test their confidence and self-trust. The stage becomes a real-life lab where we can observe that growth in action. When teachers frame nervous as normal, these students start to see it as readiness, not danger. They learn their body isn't betraying them. It's preparing them to communicate. This study includes observations of how that change happens, how students move from tensions to focus, from what if I fail to let me share my sound from my instrument. It bridges the gap between clinical models that reduce anxiety and educational models that use challenge to build resilience. 3 questions guided in this study. First, how does being seen reshape confidence? Second, what shows that visibility feels safe? Third, how can teachers turn fear into strength? Let's go do some findings. This study includes 3 recurring developmental trajectories identified across hundreds of young performers. Together, they illustrate how confidence and identity are constructed through visibility, not merely as musical improvement, but as shifts in psychological orientation toward being seen. First, avoidance to appearance. Early participants displayed avoidance behaviors, like avoiding the spotlight, avoiding delaying stage entry, or freezing under the attention. Through repeated and supported exposure, these behaviors transitioned toward approach. Students discovered that confidence is not a failure for performance, but as a product of it. Over time, psychological tension decreased, behavioral persistence increased, and visibility became tolerable. Second, compliance. A second tragedy involved technically proficient students whose performances lacked emotional engagement. when educators invited them to articulate personal meaning in music, asking, "What do you want to express?" Their musical phrasing, tone, and posture transformed. This shift marked the move from compliance to communication. Artistry became relational, not procedural. Third, expression to agency. Advanced students began defining their own standard of success. They selected repertoire aligned with identity, evaluated themselves through honesty rather than approval, and demonstrated interpretive autonomy. As one participant reflected, "I stopped asking, was it perfect? But start asking, was it honest in music for performing?" A clear indicator of emerging self-authorship. Across all three trajectories, a consistent developmental pattern emerged as children's relationship with visibility matured. Self-concept expanded. Let's go to some case example. Let's start with a simple story. One of my young student, 9 years old, played beautifully in the studio, but suddenly frozen every time when she walked onto the stage. Her bow shook, her breathing stopped, and she whispered, "What if everyone sees me fail?" So I changed the goal. I told her, "You don't need to be perfect. Just walk to the center, take one big breath, and start." That become our practice day by day, week by week. No pressure for flawless playing, just the courage to begin. Weeks by weeks later, she started walking out on her own. She still made mistakes, but she finished every piece with pride. After one recital, she looked at me and said, "I was scared, but I made it happen." That moment captured the essence of growth. Her fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled her. She learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move anyway. This study includes many stories like hers, where small, supported performances helped students rebuild self-trust. When children are guided to face visibility step by step, the stage stops being a test and becomes a place to practice bravely. Case 2. Another student, a 13-year-old cellist, played everything perfectly, but without emotion. Her sound was clean, but it feels empty. So I kept asking her, week by week, "What do you want this phrase to say about?" She paused and said, "It feels nothing." So by week practice, asking questions, by encouragement, that's a small shift from accuracy to meaning, changed everything. After weeks practices, her tone was soft, her phrasing breathed, and her shoulder tried to be more and more relaxed. She began performing as if the piece had a story in it. This study also includes dozens of such tuning points, moments when meaning entered and anxiety faded. Her focus moved from, "Was I perfect?" into, "Was I sincere to the music when I performed? Conveying to the audience the step went through?" And that change reflects that the heart of artistic learning, expression as connection, not performance as compliance. When students reach expressive things, something like shifts, they start asking not how to play, but why. One 16-year-old pianist told me after a competition, I think I played more honestly than perfectly, and that felt better. That moment captures what this study calls the emergence of agency. When performance turns from following rules to expressing the truth, students begin choosing music that reflects who they are, creating recital themes by their own and shaping interpretations on their own thoughts. The stage stops feeling like judgment and starts feeling like conversation. This study includes several late-stage reflections like this. Students felt calmer, not because fear was gone, but because their purpose had changed. They weren't performing to impress someone, but to communicate in their own thoughts. And that's where agency begins. When performing is no longer about proving yourself, but about being your true self. All of these patterns, the fear, the recovery, the courage, and the voice, came together in what I call the performance to present framework. Let's call it P2P. This study includes the observation of a clear psychological sequence. As students moved from avoidance to authorship, they passed through 3 keys of permissions, each one a deeper step toward confidence and self-acceptance. First, permission to appear. This is the hardest step. It means showing up even when unsure. One student feels safe being visible. The nervous system starts linking attention with safety instead of threats. They stop hiding and start showing up. Second, permission to express. After visibility feels safe, expression starts to bloom. Students begin performing not for approval, but for connection. Here, confidence isn't about being fearless. It's about having intention. Third, permission to exist. This is where real agency appears. Students start performing with honesty rather than control, accepting mistakes as part of their story. The stage becomes not a place of judgment, but a mirror of self-recognition. This framework matters because it gives teachers a language for teaching courage, not just technique. It bridges art and psychology, showing that stage experience can build resilience, motivation, and genuine confidence. So, what does this mean for educators? It means performance isn't just the end of learning, it's a part of learning itself. Every recital, every studio class, every small moment on stage becomes a chance to practice confidence, focus, and self-expression. This study includes 3 simple things, but powerful strategies from the P2P framework we just discussed. First, safe exposures. Hold frequent, low-pressure performance, peer recitals, class run-throughs, even parent mini-shows. When being seen become routine, fear will go away. Second, reframe arousal. Teach the body language. Educators can help students to see racing heart or shaking hands not as panic, but as readiness. It's the same energy that fuels focus and excitement. Third, meaning-based feedback. Shift the lens. Educator can ask, Was it expressive instead of was it perfect? When we value honesty and communication over flowness, students build real ownership and motivation. When these ideas are used consistently, nervousness becomes energy, imperfection becomes learning, and the classroom itself becomes a small stage of courage. The study, qualitative and based mostly on Western classical music, a setting that values precision and individual performances. Future research should explore other traditions where music emphasizes community, humility, or shared harmony. In those contexts, confidence may grow through belonging rather than individual bravery. Another direction will say digital stage. Live streams, online recitals, global audience that never turn off. This study includes early signs that online visibility can both empower and pressure students. So we must ask, does digital exposure build confidence or perfectionism? Finally, teachers play a key role. If the stage is a developmental space, the teacher is the student's first audience. How we respond with our judgment shapes how children face every stage after. To conclude, this study shows that stage performance can be a powerful tool for children's emotional and psychological growth. Through repeated and supported exposure, students don't just manage anxiety, they transform it. Fear becomes focus. Tension becomes readiness. This study calls on educators and parents to see artistic spaces as essential learning environments. Here, children build confidence, empathy, and resilience, qualities that last far beyond music. This study includes theoretical and empirical foundations from Bendoa, Goffman, Hope, Ryan, and Desi, and recent research in performance psychology and resilience. Thank you for listening. I'm Peiwen Su, representing the CYMC International Music Festival and Competition from the United States. This study includes not only research data, but also the voices of the young performers who trusted me with their stories. I also want to sincerely thank the CIPE 2026 Organizing Committee for creating such a meaningful space for researchers, educators, and artists to connect and grow together. Thank you to reviewers and all of my fellow presenters for your guidance, inspiration, and dedication to human development. Thank you again, and thank you, CIPE, for this incredible opportunity.